can resolve their query first time more often, and they're allowed to keep up to date with the progress of whatever they want to contact us about, and we have our My account to make sure they can both transact with us but also they can keep up to date with their queries, and we'll be revamping our website again to make sure that it's easier for our residents to navigate that. We also have our digital inclusion programme. I've just been talking a little bit about that at the audit committee, is to make sure we equip people with the skills, connectivity and technology, and also make sure we're prioritising contact with our vulnerable and digitally excluded residents. We also have, I was about to say the slightly less sexy, but Darren will probably kick me under the table, of consolidating and improving systems, which is how we're using our internal ICT systems. We're heavily reliant on ICT systems, as most of the world is nowadays. But actually, sometimes we need to replace them. Sometimes they go end of life. Sometimes we need to invest in them, but also to make sure that they talk to each other, to make sure they work with each other. And we've got some significant programs. For example, our planning system becomes end of life soon, so we're looking to replace that. We're looking at our housing systems at the moment to give a better resident experience, also to drive our processing efficiency in the back office. We're also about halfway through of reducing the number of education systems via the investment of the digital strategy. So there's a lot of work that Darren and his team do around consolidating and improving our systems. And last but no means least, enabling. So you can throw as much technology as you want at people. Actually, you've got to make sure you're using it in the best possible way. A good example is my lovely newish laptop. So we're rolling out new laptops across the organisation. They're Windows 11, so we're on the up-to-date operating system, and they're really powerful tools. Some of them have got Copilot, so the AI Microsoft tool built into them, as in the ones that we pay for, but they also have generally AI built into them. We've got to make sure our officers use them in the best possible way. So we've rolled out learning and development programs to enable officers as well as members to be more productive. Again, you'll see as part of our strategy is to reduce the amount of paper. So we're trying to make sure, as part of our budget savings for next year, and we rolled it out on January 1st, that we don't ordinarily give paper copies of committees, to make sure that I can see people beautifully using all the technology they have in front of them to look at that. So part of what we're doing is the same for officers, same for members, is using the technology we've got to the best possible way to make sure that we're protecting our precious resources and using those for our vulnerable residents. So in terms of updates, so again, we only had the strategy agreed in October. We'll do an annual report, but this is a kind of interim report of where we are in terms of, and I've broken it down by council services as a way of easily understanding what we're doing in each of the services. I've been slightly selfish. I've put my service first, as I lead corporate services. So as part of what we've done in terms of digital transformation and aligned to the digital strategies, we've rolled out the resident hub. Previously, we had a customer experience team, we had a business administration team. We've merged those into one team under one leader, and we've delivered over £1 million of savings already, and we'll deliver more savings next year. And that's by making sure that we automate and simplify a lot of our processes, make sure we're as efficient as possible in terms of the back office, but to make sure we're passporting that to our customers through the investment that we've made in the AI technology to make it easier for people to help themselves. As I previously mentioned, we've got the digital inclusion work, so we've been piloting this. So we've had a laptop scheme that's rolled out to 69 residents through a partnership with the Good Things Foundation, and we're about to roll out 50 more of our refreshed old devices. So these are the new devices. Again, we've rolled out just over half, nearly 2/3 now, out to the rest of the organisation through the cabinet paper. We agreed to refurb and refresh some of our old devices as part of our investment back into the community, and rolling those back out into the community to make sure that we target our vulnerable residents. So it's been really successful, and we've done the good pilot to our 69 residents. We've got some really good feedback. We've done some case studies in the press press around how people have used them, and we're looking at rolling out more and more of these over time as we roll them more out to our officers. And that's also making sure that we're not just rolling out the devices. We think about the connectivity, we think about learning and development as well, to make sure that we can support people in the best possible way. Another thing that we've been doing in my service is the Enhanced Care and Support Directory. So we're about to roll that out. It's in beta. That means it's in test at the moment, and that's due to go live in March. And we've also got some new My Account developments in place at the moment, and they're about to be rolled out. And we've already made some additions by adding consultations, adult education classes, and some enhancements to the look and feel of My Account and our website. Probably the biggest change I think we've made in terms of the digital strategy is what we've done internally around business intelligence. So previously we had all of our data was all on Excel. It was all difficult to understand what it meant, and we weren't using it to drive ourselves forward as a business. Over the last 12 months we've pulled this together, and we now have over around about 100 automated dashboards that are rolled out to people across the organisation that manage things like performance, activity, cost, and actually we've cut down a lot of the cost in the organisation about moving data around from spreadsheets, putting them into graphs. It's all automated on Power BI. It's used in the way that we run our business is a critical way that we're understanding and managing our finances through our activity, as well as our performance of services in our offices as well. So that's been a sea change in modernising ourselves as an organisation. We've also provided a new residence view of how we do that. So it's live on our website. You can see data. I'm a big fan of publishing data where possible, so open data. So at the moment that's a lot of census data, a lot of more simple data. We're going to build on that throughout this year to make sure we're giving more and more data out. So as you know, we get asked a lot of questions for things like freedom of information. We're going to try and publish more and more of that data to make sure that people can help themselves rather than write into us to cost us time and money to answer questions that we've been answered before. So again, we'll be publishing more over time. And in my area, registrars, we've introduced a new booking system, and we're looking at, again, driving more business, making ourselves more commercial in the way that we're thinking about the look and feel of how people can look at the new registrar's facilities, which will be coming very, very soon. We're putting those on the website. It's a better booking system, so people have a great experience, whether it's a birth, a death, or a marriage. In terms of finance, excuse me. So some of the key things we've done. So financial assessments for adult services. So we've made sure we automate several of the processes. So again, previously it was a really manualised processes, and we've made improvements to our online forms. We've revamped our web content, and we've put our AI-enabled telephony platform for the transactional finance team. So this gives us a better resident experience in terms of people being able to financially assess themselves, as well as in the back office for that to be as streamlined as possible. And we can deliver that much more quickly, and that's been a big improvement in terms of what we've been doing as a council. In our Revs and Bend services, we've made lots of key automations and integrations, and that means we've also been using our data and reporting so we can understand how we're billing, where gaps are, but we're also doing some work at the moment to roll out a new resident portal for revenues, which allow residents to more sign up for e-billing, online notifications, so we can discourage people to ring us up to do things that they can do themselves by giving them better information. We've got an amazing fraud service, and we've supported them in terms of the digitisation. So we've been looking to digitise some of their work around efficiencies, and we're doing some work in progress to understand how we can identify fraud more readily and use some of the data and digital tools we've got to support the amazing work that team does. In terms of a PCI, so several of our systems fall under the PCI DSS, so therefore we've had to enable enable us to have a more secure pathway for sending, receiving and processing payment data. So we've now got a completely secure process for doing that. Well, we did, but we need to update it on a regular basis. But we've also got to make sure that we comply from a government perspective as well, as all local authorities do. So that's part of the digital strategy to make sure we've got that. And in a kind of slightly smaller, we've developed an app, so that's vehicle defect inspection app. So we've got a mobile app to enforce daily checks on vehicles across all of our frontline services, and that will help the checking processes, again, a very manual process that people did this on paper, put it into systems, improve safety, but also it enables us to cut costs as well. So when we're thinking about the maintenance cost of vehicles, it helps us to manage those expensive costs moving forward. And again, an area that's costing us more, that we've identified it and put in some digital methods to make sure we spend our resources more wisely. Homes and communities, housing a massive priority for us as an organisation, and we've done a big review of some of the key modules in terms of housing compliance. We've got new statutory compliance areas around that, and again that's been ramped up in terms of what we're doing around that, and particularly understanding our risk assets. So we've been doing a lot of joint work in terms of how we're reviewing some of our back office processes to understand housing compliance. We've been doing some work with antisocial behaviour as well, tenancy management, homelessness, allocations, choice-based lettings, repairs. So a significant amount of work that sits across all of our homes and communities directorate to make sure we're giving better resident experience. Again, an area that we hadn't invested in previous years, and we're investing more and more to drive better decisions, but also a better experience for our residents. And in terms of what does that look like from a resident experience, we've improved our web content. So again, from a housing perspective, our residents are more enabled to contact us through online forms, for example, things like household support and tenancy management, and some of those are just about to be rolled out as well. And I talked a little bit about antisocial behaviour, which is we're designing the new resident and staff experience around that. Place, again, one of our big directorates, and we've been doing a lot of work in waste services to make sure that we're doing a systems review of domestic and commercial waste. Again, a lot of our contact through the contact centre will be around miss bins, around domestic and commercial waste. So we've made some enhancements to support things like garden waste collections, recycling, and also a review of the telephony used at the recycling centre as well. We've moved some of our services to our AI telephony platform, so we've moved parking services, repair services, again, areas that residents contact us a lot. It costs us a lot of money if people are ringing up and sending us emails, so we've moved those to our AI telephony platform, so not only do the residents get a better experience, but it's also cheaper for us to do. We've automated the way we do our voids as well, so that again, we want to turn around our voids as quickly as possible, and it enables our repairs team to pick them up more quickly and move away from, again, what was a paper-based system to a digital solution. And the new system utilises a mobile app that enables the inspectors out there that look at voids to conduct property inspections via tablets that feed into the back office systems as well. So we're cutting down the time it takes to do that, so we can turn around our voids more quickly. In terms of planning, again, I talked a little bit about that at the start, is we're in the midst of looking at our new planning systems. We're looking at the market, understanding how we can deliver those services moving forward. And in terms of garages, we're streamlining the management of our garages as well by leveraging digital solutions in how we do that. In terms of adult social care and health, we've, again, a small thing, but again makes a big difference, is we've implemented an electronic medication administration record. Again, it was a paper-based system in terms of the way we administer medication to some of our most vulnerable people. We've put that on an app now, so actually we can focus on our vulnerable people, and actually we can make sure we've got a safe and secure mechanism for understand how we do that. Our Families Information Services, again, moved onto the AI telephony platform. platform. So again, one of our really successful services, and we're making sure that we deliver the best resident experience. And in terms of our front door, so people coming in and contact us in the first place, is we're doing some detailed work with social care and professionals to make sure we've got the right portals in place that we can that people can put in their details, both professional if they're a GP, rather than ringing us up, sending us an email. So we've got significant cost and volumes that previously have come in over emails that are quite difficult. Someone has to write an email. We get an email, we're having to understand the email, key it into the system, there's probably incorrect data in there, so we have to ring the person back, get them to correct the data. So kind of a big cost and a failure demand, and actually we're automating that to make it as easy as possible, which means we can support our vulnerable residents in the most efficient way moving forward. And again, going back to our vulnerable residents telecare, we've digitised the service as well, so we're making sure we support the professional medical referrals in terms of telecare. And in terms of, last but no means least, in terms of children's, we've delivered a new fostering website, again a programme that we've rolled out over this financial year, and making sure that we can attract as many people but also seamlessly take them through the process so they become foster carers. And we're currently doing some work to make sure we use some of the data and some of the tools we have to market ourselves as a borough. We've got a new fostering offer, again market those to our residents, and beyond that to do more bespoke targeted marketing of those. In terms of our special educational needs service, is we've delivered an online website, so that makes sure that again that we're more transparent, but also we can deliver things in the best possible way to our residents and our families. And we've moved our Stronger Families service to our AI telephony platform as well. So, and last but no means least is education, health and care plans. Is we're at the moment evaluating options to look at the use of technology to improve the service for residents. So using AI technology to deliver those plans and review those plans in the most efficient and quick way. I won't go through the appendices because they're pretty difficult to read, but this it's not what you can see there. It's about the volume of work. So in terms of what we're doing around digital, is there is a significant volume of work we're doing at the moment. So a lot over the last 12 months is getting the organisation to understand the art of the possible, to understand some of the things that we could do within the service. Now we have far too much demand. So we know all the things we could digitise and all the things we could improve. It's endless at the moment, and they're not all of them. At the moment, we go through a prioritisation methodology to understand which drive the biggest benefits. So cashable benefits are predominant in terms of how we do things, but also resident experience and to understand failure demand. So again, we're in a good place as an organisation that we understand the art of the possible, we understand what can be done. And my job as Chief Operating Officer is to prioritise those to deliver the most effective ones. In terms of transformation, in the more generality, is that supports our savings, as does the digital work. So again, we have a vast array of work that sits across all of our directorates that's aligned with the digital work about how we can improve the cost of our services but deliver a better resident experience. Again, I'm in terms of time, I'm not going to go through all the projects because I've gone through a lot of detailed kind of digital projects, but there's a significant, and I'll send the presentation round to the committee, and you can always ask me questions outside of the committee. Is we've got a significant volume of work in terms of what we're doing, and also we manage it from a risks perspective as well. So I've just been into the audit committee to talk about risk and how we manage our services. Part of what we do is not only look at what's best, what we can digitise, is we have to think about our risks and how we govern the way we do digital. So we have a strong governance framework around what we do that goes right from the top to bottom, right from project, goes right up the way to members, and I sit on all the governance boards, or I have one of my team sit on all the governance boards. in each project we're looking at the risks surrounding the delivery of the project, but also to prioritise which projects we're doing in the first place, and we're checking on those on a monthly basis to make sure, as I described in the previous committee, is not all projects go as they might want to when they first start. That is fine. Projects run in a squiggly line as opposed to a straight line. My job, my team's job, is to make sure we manage them as closely as possible. We're picking up any risks and issues as we go along, but also where we need to course correct, where we need to change our priorities, and that's an evaluation of not only the projects but also our investment plan. We set our investment plan in October. That investment plan needs to be reviewed on a regular basis because we've seen, significant changes in technology on a regular basis. The marketplace is changing on a regular basis. So part of the role of myself and my team is to make sure we review, evaluate, and we've got the governance framework that surrounds that. And therefore, we are mitigating the risks of the organisation by doing it in a very open, transparent, and a managed way in terms of what we do. That's a brief snapshot of everything we're doing around digital, some of the controls we have, and some of the progress we've been making, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the presentation or anything around digital.
Thank you, Matthew, for quite a comprehensive and detailed report. I think we can all agree there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. Before I sort of defer to my colleagues, I just wanted to ask the question that, you've given a lot of anecdotal examples of improvements in sort of the customer experience and user experience. Is this backed up by any sort of like benchmarking data in terms of where we started before some of these projects, where we are now? Just thinking, for example, call cycle times from before the move to telephony and after. You talked about like volumes of emails, so that would just be interesting if you could shed some light on those topics. Thank you.
So yes, it's a simple answer. So I'm at heart a data nerd, and that's the way I help to run the business, by understanding the analytics and using those to drive improvement changes. So I have dashboards. I can't put them up on screen at the moment, unfortunately, because some of them are sensitive. But I can see pretty much everything that happens across the organisation in terms of volumes from a customer contact perspective, by service, the changes over time. So we're monitoring that on a daily basis, and then they're rolled up into weekly, monthly reports. So we have that wealth of information in terms of what we're doing, but also we're obviously translating that into budget savings as well, because we can't get away from the fact that we need to make significant budget savings as an organisation. And so we're tracking our progress on everything we do against budget savings, against contact, and we're using that information to help shape the future services. So, for example, we're using, where we've got higher volumes, they're the ones that we're going to prioritise to bring in AI telephony or to remodel those services. Where we're seeing spikes in data, i.e. we're seeing more demand or more volumes coming in, and you'll get things like seasonal adjustments. So again, we are shaping how we run our new resident hub via an analytics-based approach. We've just become a lot more sophisticated in doing that over the last 12 months, because previously it was all Excel data. We were interpreting Excel data. Now it's all on live dashboards. So I can see all the contact, I can see all FOIs, I can see all member inquiries. And it's not just me, my leadership team, as well as we send that out across to corporate directors and senior managers across the organisation that can help them shape their services. So I do it from a contact perspective, but also I'm supporting the rest of the organisation in understanding what they're doing around their services. So whether that's waste, whether that's social care assessments, we've got automated dashboards that sit across all of our organisation, and in fact we work really closely with the cabinet as well, in particular the leader, who the leader has access to dashboards that help manage our key risks and also our key services as well. So, for example, housing, adult social care, children's social care, education, we have all that data automated. That's great, but as part of what we do is the enabling program is the learning and development piece. So you've got to be able to use data, you've got to be able to understand it, you've got to use it to make a difference and make decisions. So we're spending a lot of time and effort of not just rolling out the new technology, not just rolling out the new dashboards, not just having that benchmarking data, that user data. We're making sure we're using it to make more effective decisions as an organisation through members and also officers as well. So that's a big part of the digital strategy, is how we do that. But yeah, I love data. In fact, we've got so much data as a council, so much data, it's making sure that we use it in the best possible way, and that's how we track it over time. And also, it's a very long answer, is when you're talking about benchmarking and the use of data, it's all about, it's in fact about using data in the future. So how are we predicting what we're thinking in terms of levels of volumes and demand about some of our services? So a good example of that might be things like temporary accommodation. We're not dealing with the temporary accommodation we need today. We have financial and service modelling based on the analytics we have to understand what we need over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because that will be part of our asset strategy about what sort of properties we need over what period of time. So this is how we're really using data to make sure we are understanding how we run our services now, but also model for the future and make the right investment decisions as a council.
Great, thank you for such a comprehensive answer. Okay, Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Anisha, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was no paper submitted with this and we didn't get the slides in advance before unless I've missed them. I know I'm subbing on this meeting.
That's correct. But members do have an option of presentation and report, so presentation is fine as well, but the presentation slides will be circulated to members after the meeting. Okay,
I'm going to say that I sit on Licensing Committee, the Resident Services Committee, the Children, Families and Education Select Committee, and this is the first time I've not had paperwork in advance. That was a lot of information to take in. And I'm not blaming you, by the way. I think officers should be presenting us, if they can, with this kind of information in advance so we can properly scrutinise it, because I found that really interesting and really encouraging, and as somebody who tries to be positive on these scrutiny committees at all times, I found that a lot to take in, Chair. And I just wondered if in future, when we're doing this, we can try and get some of this information in advance, because I found that it's incredible, it's amazing what the council is doing, but that was a lot to take in, and this is meant to be a scrutiny committee, and I'm going to find that very difficult to scrutinise with the amount of information I had to take in a short space of time. So I just wondered if in future we can look at getting this information in advance, or at least seeing a paper, because in every other committee I sit on, even when we're getting an update, we get a paper as well. I'm not blaming you, Anisha.
Thank you, Councillor. We can definitely feed back to officers that reports are the preference, but as I indicated earlier, there is the option as well for presentations, but I do appreciate your points and I will feed back to officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smallwood. Councillor Gohale.
Thank you, Chair. I will just say, I'm sorry, I have to agree with Councillor Smallwood. That wasn't my question. I did have a question actually around, what was the phrasing that we used? The data banks and the digital exclusion bits, and I just wanted to, it's actually the first I've heard of it, and I thought it was a great idea, actually. I thought it was a really, really good idea. I'm really glad that we're doing this as a council. Has this been advertised in Hillingdon People at all? Because, I get I just Googled it quickly, and we have a page on the website, but if someone's digitally excluded, they're not going to be using a website, right? And yeah, I just wonder if we can, because it also said on there that you pick them up from libraries and whatnot, and maybe that's just something that we can include if we haven't already.
Yeah, really good question. So we've not done this before, and what we did with the first 69 is test it via nominations from staff who are working with vulnerable people. So we know it is going to be successful. What we're doing now is to open it up more, and we know that if we advertise it, there's a sort of dissonance in the fact that if we advertise it too widely, everyone will want a laptop and a device. Why wouldn't you want a free laptop and a device? So we have to get the balance right, and it's kind of one of the tricky things that I face, and actually Councillor Banerjee is a big supporter of the work we're trying to do, is making sure that we have the right criteria, we're marketed in the right way. It's been in Hillingdon People in terms of the case studies of the people that we're impacting on the change, because what we're trying to do is tell people stories about how it's impacting on people's life, rather than the fact we've just given out a laptop. We want to take the story through about what the difference it's made. We're trying to prioritise it on our more vulnerable residents, as opposed to people that just want a nice free laptop, thank you. So we're making sure we advertise it in the right way. But yes, there is a distance to the fact that if you only advertise it digitally and people are digital excluded in the first place, they're not going to find out about it. So that's why we're doing it in a multiple way of trying to get across to people in a different way. Actually, and this is the really interesting bit, is it's the knowledge of our officers that are working with these people on a regular basis that, and actually Councillor Banerjee has fed back to me, actually you could do that through members, is we probably wouldn't need to market this at all, and we would have enough demand by using the cohort of the young and the elderly people we work with, the vulnerable people, but also through your connections as ward councillors and members, is that would probably be the first starting place, as well as some soft advertising and things like libraries. That would take enough demand to have all the devices that we could recycle at present. And then we will look at working more with the voluntary and the community sector to see, once we've done a big rollout, we might be able to get more funding and more support to be able to do more of it. So actually it's through the knowledge of the people, you know. I think it's a really powerful story to tell back into the organisation about how we understand our residents, how members understand our residents, and how we're doing it through our connections with the place we work out, rather than marketing it too heavily. So my personal preference is I prefer that story, and I think it's more empowering as we go back. But yes, I will make sure that when we are doing this more as a more of a detailed rollout, that I write to all members, because actually I want all of your input in to do this, to make sure we're making it as effective as possible, because we all want our most vulnerable residents to have the best possible start in life and the best possible life chances, and this is part of the work we're doing.
Quickly through you, Chair, if that's okay. That's great. Just a few thoughts on that. Firstly, even if we're not advertising it, we should be telling residents that we're doing it. For starters, that's just basic, and we absolutely should be doing that, because we should want them to know in any case, even if it's not something they can sign up for in that moment. Just a couple of quick ideas off the top of my head that could help with the process. You can, rather than people applying for it for themselves, you can add in extra, and I hate myself for saying this, you can add in extra layers of bureaucracy, such as nominate someone who you think might be vulnerable and might benefit from it. You can reach out to schools if it's kids who might benefit from it, or those who take our adult learning courses, maybe at the council, they might benefit from it as well. I understand you're saying that you might have enough just through council contacts and members. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it on the members side of things as well. But just a couple of ideas. But I don't think we should exclude. Not exclude the wrong word here. I don't think we should make the process that caters only to staff and to members, because as much as there are people, you know, I sometimes when I'm doing my street surgeries, I knock on the door of residents who wouldn't be able to know how to contact me if I hadn't gone and knocked there on that day, because they don't have a computer, and you know, some of them have the council's number written on a post-it note in the fridge, but not all of them. And there's actually a lot of elderly residents who wouldn't know otherwise. So, but I don't think that someone might know them who might want to help them enter this world. But otherwise, I think it's a really great idea, to be honest, and I really like the work that's being done, and also on the digital upgrades and stuff, the AI. I heard about it at the Members' Day, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I just wanted to have that minuted if possible.
Appreciate that, and when I said through council officers, that is things like adult education, that's schools, so working with so we're working through those services that interact with those residents. But it's lovely, because whenever I talk to members, or in fact staff, it's their passion to want to improve, and I wish I had 10,000 laptops as opposed to up to 500, because actually it would make such a big difference. But some of it is about use bureaucracy. And you're right, you can create and I've done this in other places, you can create too much bureaucracy around that, which ends up costing us quite a lot of money. It's doing the most effective way and the most targeted way. But yeah, it is in Hillingdon people, and the more we can talk to people about it, and we'll make sure members are briefed more, and I'll feed that back to my comms team as well, because we should be talking to members more about this.
Great, thank you. Councillor Jubadar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Matthew. Great presentation. You're doing a lot of things. You mentioned data a number of times, and I'd like to ask you, have we actually as an organisation identified all our data, their ownership, and when they reside on our systems?
Indeed, we have. So we have an information governance board, which I chair, and I work, Darren, closely with it. So we understand all of our data sources, we understand the security of the data, we understand how we get the best use out of the data, and why it's important is this is going to be a challenge in the public sector and the private sector over the next couple of years, as you know, with AI. So making sure we understand how we're using the data and putting the governance around that is incredibly important moving forward, and particularly with the new investments that we're going to make, is we've got to better understand how we're using that data in the safest way to make sure we're protecting our residents, but also make sure that we are making the best possible decisions based on using that data, and of course not letting computers make the decision, but using the data and rolling it up into informing how we make better decisions as an organisation. So we've put a lot of work over the last 6 months. I'd say there's an incredible amount of work over the next 12 months, which actually Darren leads for me, in terms of everything we do around information governance, anything to do around data protection. So I think we're in a good place around this, but I'm more forward thinking in the fact that I know we need to do better at it, and we and Darren and I work really closely on making sure we've got things like an AI policy. We're understanding how we're using our data in the most broadest sense, and people think about data as in the things that you can see on your screen. It's also the data on WhatsApp. It's your data from your CCTV. It's data that so data is so multifaceted, and we're a very complicated organisation that runs multiple systems. We use data in very different ways. Our inward and outward data is being used in different ways, but as my role is, data is a power for good. The more that you can control it, the more you can use it, the better you're going to be as a business, and that's generally my MO in terms of how I work. So yeah, I think we're in a good place. I wouldn't, and the slight caveat with that is, and we'll talk about cybersecurity later, is you can't be perfect in the use of data. So you can't understand every piece of data in the organisation, you can't understand how it's used, or you can't control it all the time, because actually, again, data flows are happening all the time, and people want our data. They want to get into our organisation all the time. The amount of cyber threats we have on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, is significant as any organisation. So we work in a business. Data is gold. Data has such value for us as an organisation, and that's why we made the smart decision via the digital strategy to make some significant investments in how we're using it, but also how we're using cyber to protect our data in the first place. So, and again, we'll talk about that in the next section, is we've made the right investments to protect our data as well as govern it. But actually, when you step away from it all, and I say this every time, I'm quite boring about this, it's how you use the data is the most important thing. I can always get better. All my officers, we can always get better at how we're using the data to inform better decisions that has impacts on our residents. That's the gold bit we need to get to.
Can I ask one more question, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. You mentioned AI telephony platform a number of times, and you also mentioned that you've moved a number of services into the new AI platform. So my question is, how many telephony platforms actually do we have?
I'll give you the answer. It's too many. A part of the work we're doing is, when I first joined, we had over. So you have the technical bit of who provides a telephony platform, then you have the amount of telephone numbers. He's the expert, and I'll get him to talk about this in a minute. We had over 100 telephone lines as a council, which is a crazy situation for us to be in, and a lot of them are routed through the switchboard, and a lot of them are going into direct services. What we're trying to do is, from a technical perspective, is consolidate our telephony platforms, so the technical bits that sit around it, but also move them into single sources, so they're all answered within the resident hub. When they're answered in the resident hub, the preference is to move them onto the AI platform. that enables residents to have a better experience. So we've gone on a journey for the last couple of years. Again, it's really nice to get the plaudits from central government that we're one of the most forward-facing councils, in fact the first to adopt a AI telephony platform in the public sector. We're actually looking to, as I said before, we're looking to make a step change in our investment, which we'll be announcing this month, of going that next step of more embedding a more sophisticated AI approach to give an even better resident experience, to even more reduce our costs in terms of what we do, and to really cut down the amount of telephony platforms which Darren and his team are working on at the moment, but also to make sure we reduce the amount of telephone numbers in a very simple way. We don't actually really want people to call us unless they're vulnerable residents. We want people to help themselves. Last but no means least, and I'll tie the two things together, is we use the data that we've got to identify from a telephony point of view, is we can identify people when they call us, who they are, and if they're vulnerable. If they're vulnerable, we put them to the front of the telephone queue to make sure we answer them first as well. So we're using the data that we've got, we're using the telephony platform we've got to help our most vulnerable residents. Does that answer your question? Darren can do the technical bit around technical platforms, but it's
no, I just you mentioned the AI telephony and moving services onto it, so that brought up the question: how many platforms do we have? Also, I happen to see Cisco telephony in the office, for example. Are we still running Cisco telephony in this organisation?
So our direction of travel is away from the Cisco telephony and to integrate telephony within the Microsoft Teams platform, and then that way officers have one single way of communicating both internally and externally. We've had problems in the past with having a mixture of physical telephone handsets, soft handsets on devices, soft handsets on mobile devices. The experience with the current platform is that sometimes, depending upon where you're logged in, your calls don't always get to the other location where you are, and officers are having to flip from one device to another device. With Teams, it's all seamless and it just follows you around. And the problem with Cisco telephony that we've had is that officers have been unreachable at critical times when the contact centre have been trying to put calls through, and that's not a good experience for residents. If you can't get to the person that you need to speak to at the time you need to speak to them, it's driving that failure demand. So yes, we are consolidating that area, and as Matthew has said, we had hundreds of different, over 100 different telephone numbers which was being answered on a combination of individual extension numbers or group numbers which went to a number of officers, or a proper call queuing system, and all of that's outside of a contact centre. So that's all going to people that aren't contact centre professionals who might be engaged on other things and again not available to take calls. So really rationalising this is giving us that opportunity to make sure calls are going to the right place and can be answered in the most appropriate way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garg.
So I realise you've got quite a vast range of things that you're transforming, and with the digitalisation, I've got two questions really. The first one is, I think on your first slide, point 3 was customer experience. I realise that you're trying to stop people ringing in. However, in my ward, as Councillor Gorhill has said as well, I have got a number of residents who don't want to use digital ways, and they found that when they can't find a number to ring, which so what do we do with those people? And when they have got through, they've been told, we can't speak to you, we can't take your details, you have to go through your counsellor. So that was one around the experience. Is there someone monitoring that sort of thing? And the second one is around data integrity. So is there any checks to see if someone is putting in their details, for example, slightly differently in my account or on a planning application? Usually with system implementations, you get some sort of fallback of duplicates. but is there any checks being made? So what is there to stop me being called Narinder KGOG and Narinder GOG on the system and making 2 planning applications, etc.?
Really good questions. I'm slightly surprised if someone's ringing us up and been told they can't speak to us and they have to go through a counsellor. That shouldn't happen. If you've got any examples of that, you can come and let me know directly, because that's not the case. We've always got to recognise that people aren't always going to want to use digital forms of engagement with the council, and residents will often get frustrated if they have to go through a hopper of AI. We understand that. What we want to do is make the resident experience as good as possible for the 60% of people that the data tells us that 60% of people will do things digitally, as you do with anything you do on your phone or with on your laptop. We're making sure that we can do things that are mobile specific. We know the data that people don't want to do things 9 to 5 necessarily, and they don't want to do things on laptop. They want to do things on a mobile phone on the go when it's convenient to them. So we're trying to reshape our website. We're trying to reshape the customer experience so it's as easy as possible to contact us, and also move to more of a 24/7 365 council. And that's why the new investment will make sure that we can do more outside council core hours, that people don't need to contact us in the first place. That's why we want to put the investment back into the people that we do actually need to talk to, the people that either don't want to or can't use the digital mechanisms to do so. But again, we use our data to be able to prioritise our vulnerable people. But this will happen over a period of time. So this doesn't happen, in one go. It happens over, a couple of years, that you're driving more and more demand, and more, and as questions by the previous councillors, is you've got to advertise this. If people can't, that's why we have Hillingdon people to advertise some of this. That's why the phone numbers are in there, and that's why we try and advertise. And we're putting more communications, engagement, marketing around what we're doing to assist people doing that. Now, I sat on a load of calls last week to listen into what kind of, as I do on a regular basis, to understand what people are contacting us. And sometimes the residents don't always get the best experience by looking at the data, by listening into the calls. So we can listen into all of our calls, and my managers can, so we can check if there's any complaints, any issues, and we can understand sentiment, i.e. whether people are grumpy or unhappy or happy, in fact. So we can understand all of that, and it's clear that in certain areas that we need to improve how we do things. For example, for housing repairs is quite a good example, is residents are often frustrated because they've been assessed and they don't know what the next steps are, and that's why we're trying to automate that and give people the understanding. For homelessness, for example, people put a homelessness application in and they have to keep on ringing us back to find out what the progress is. And it's really frustrating. When you listen to the calls, sometimes it's heartbreaking, sometimes you get the frustration, sometimes you get the anger, sometimes you get the sadness of, we understand the areas that we need to improve on by listening to calls, by taking the data, and that's where we prioritise the investment of looking at the volumes, looking at the dissatisfaction, baking that back into how we can make real-term improvements. But the improvements are also in Darren's area in the back office, and that's why it's not just the customer experience, it's the consolidating improving systems, because often in councils the data is bouncing around between different systems, i.e. from the front office technology to the back office systems that the service uses, back into understanding the progress, back into my account or into the website. So we've got to make sure our systems talk to each other and are integrated to make sure we get that best possible customer experience. So again, we're on a journey, we get better and better at it every day, and we've got the investment to do so. Your second question was around duplicates and how we do that. So we have an initial check and a balance when it goes into a system to flag whether it's a duplicate record. We also, quite sadly, and this is a part of what we do on a system by system basis, is when the councillor asks a question about, do we know where our data is? We know where our data is, but we also know where there are duplicate records, so we actually have to manually cleanse some of the data as well. We've invested in the single view of the customer and the data, so that checks back on some of our core systems data to be able to do the check and balance of whether it is that person that lives at that address, and make sure we've got as clean as possible data. Now, we're not perfect at that, and actually some of the AI tools that are beautifully coming out is they do a lot of this for you. So whereas previously we've gone from paper-based systems to now systems, and now doing duplicate records, now a lot of that will be eliminated in the future just by the fact of you'll get AI be able to check across systems more quickly and to do that for you as opposed to a human doing it. So there's some really good things coming in that respect, and you've seen some of it if you've ever used some of the government services. They've actually invested in that, and they've rolled that out, and that's the sort of stuff that we'll be doing as well, that those validation checks to stop the inefficient way that we would do when people name themselves in different ways. We'll be able to automatically do that by checking existing records of them against things like council tax.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. It's encouraging, although I'm sure time-consuming, to hear that you listen to the calls and the sentiment of where people are, because you can sometimes hear more in the tone than the actual what's being said. This is not a dissimilar point to what I think I've made in the past. I'm really intrigued as to kind of what the design process is for rollout and ongoing improvement. So, for example, housing is obviously under a lot of demand, but also has some very clunky bits and pieces, even though it's been slightly modernised. The frustration from professionals when they can't automatically work through an application with someone because of the triage process now being taken away, and then people having to wait for accounts, the frustration about uploading documents and emails that never get answered, all those things that are there. What I think is missing, which for a number of the online forms where some work very well even, is the feedback. There is never a request. If you fill out a council tax reduction scheme application, there's no how was this process. If you complete a similar with any hardship funds or regular benefit bits, there's no feedback section. And if you go onto it, most government websites now, they're asking you, how did you find the process? Every commercial operator tends to do that. And something where there can be meaningful engagement, like was this page helpful? Did you get the answer you want? There's not necessarily a live conversation there. The other aspect for me is how we know we're going to be putting a significant amount of resource into a smaller group of people who are vulnerable and unable to engage digitally. And there will be some simple processes where we may not be able to digitalise them. Like everybody needs to receive a council tax bill, for example. I don't know the statutory legislation around physical versus digital, but there will be some of those barriers. But when we do housing benefit reviews, for example, it's all paper-based. There is not even a reference to go on this website. Like when you do the Canvas survey for electoral register, you get a letter, but you can also quickly log on with a key and put it in straight away. It would be useful to know when these significantly intensive processes will switch over. The EHCP is switching onto a more digitalised process. Kind of which of those, when they'll likely come online, but also that balance between everybody might need a letter for a housing benefit review, but there's always going to be a chunk, 20% of them, that can't do it without the paper or without support from a charity or something on the paper. But is there going to be an easy, simple way that has live feedback throughout it, so people can say, actually, I didn't like this process, can you change it? And so it's a bit about your implementation, how you training professionals, how much of the voluntary and community sector have you spoken to in this, how much business stakeholders have you spoken to in order to get that live feedback. I recognise there's only a few people, and if you're already trying to engage through council feedback, but it'd be really helpful to make sure we've got the user focus from the other side, because I think sometimes we can get a little bit too focused on our end, the council end of how it works, and not necessarily how people are finding new processes outside of us.
Yep, a really good question is, customer is king in any organisation, and we don't have the feedback mechanisms at the moment in our current setup. And when we're rolling out our new approach, we'll have more embedded feedback within that. I took the decision that there wasn't a massive value in doing it based on our old way of working and to put it into the new way of working. the tricky one is, how do you get the balance right between the two things? So you've got to get the right user engagement to design the digital processes in the first place. But again, we don't have a massive amount of resource to do that. So we do it on a needs basis, and we do it in the best possible way. Feedback, again, we do feedback on the website, but it's not as comprehensive as you might see for things like more of the GDS aligned services that you see in central government and also in the private sector that have significantly more resources to do that. So I'm trying to get the balance right at the moment. You know, my personal belief is you've got to test things with users, and you've got to change them, and rather than typical local government would roll out a process and keep the same form or keep the same approach, we're monitoring, we change them on a regular basis, and the investment helps us to accelerate the way we do that. But also when we're designing the new processes in terms of our new investment, is we will have more user interfaces, more feedback built into the way we do things. And your question was a little bit around prioritisation. So we've got a rollout plan, which is we prioritise based on savings and volumes. So always a difficult balancing act. And when you saw my massive slide of all the improvements, is you've got to do it on the big processes. The same way central government does it when they were looking at things like vehicle tax, and when they're looking at benefit assessments, and actually the work they're doing at the moment in the AI space, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're going by the big processes, we're going at the ones that make a real difference, and then we're putting the feedback and the user interface back into what we do. There is some work, as I put in the presentation, about revamping our website. Our website is starting to feel a little bit old at the moment, and it's still starting to feel a bit dated. You know, I inherited it. We're in a contract at the moment, but we're actually looking at changing that over this year. So we'll be looking at, so you can modify the processes, but they've got to be reflected into your website as well. So we're doing multiple changes this year at the same time to make sure it all adds up together. So it's not a small piece of work that we're doing as a team. But you know, the simple answer is yes. Feedback is really important, and no, we don't do it well enough. And yes, we do need to improve what we do. The good feedback we do is from a telephony point of view, is we've got great data around, you know, the feedback we get from a telephony platform, just not from a digital perspective, because that's how we've invested previously, and we now need to shift that investment back around into the digital feedback. So yeah, I appreciate your comments, and I've taken a steer before, and I accept it, and I take it on board, and it is the right point to make. So I thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions this time on what I think is some really positive and exciting news for the Council, and I think we should be incredibly proud that we're sort of, as usual, leading the way. I just wondered how AI bots and chat bots are being used maybe to supplement things like my account. I recently had an incredible experience with American Express, where actually if I'd been on the phone I could have been on there for 40 minutes and I had it all done, dusted, and they gave me 70 quid back in 5 minutes. So I just wondered how we're going to use that, and how that can also keep a record of someone, especially around a housing case, and keep a record of the conversation they had, and someone can just get a quick update and feel like they've spoken potentially to a real person. Because if you're an officer, you can be dealing with 30 people at once, rather you can't speak to 30 people on the phone at once. How are we using things like AI and other tools to transform the Council's messaging into like other languages, but also to support the work of councillors? I don't know about other councillors, but I have used AI to supplement my work, not do my work. But it certainly has, I think, made me better. It's helped me. I'm happy to admit I'm not good with spelling and grammar. I try my hardest, but actually it's helped me get some of my messaging an awful lot better. And then just following on from Councillor Mathers's point, how do we get a broad range of people to test our systems and test our digital transformation? Often we go to sort of like, I think both sides probably do it, you sort of go, right, the person who tests that is the most digitally savvy person we've got in the group, when actually probably the person that is the most important is maybe the person that's the least digitally savvy. And this is some of the feedback I get from my residents association, who often express to me their frustration of things that don't work very well, and almost like it's, I think one described to me in private as it was focusing getting their grandchildren going forward and them leaving them behind, and whilst they didn't mind that too much, they still wanted to be involved and still felt they could feedback. So how are we getting a broad range of people, not necessarily the people who aren't going to get digital, but the people on the beginning of their digital journey to feedback their thing, possibly in person rather than just digitally.
My biggest test would be to try to remember all those questions. Get an AI bot to repeat them. Well, I'm so digital. I did bring a pen and paper to write them down in the first place, and I forgot to type them up. So that's my bad. So the first question was, so I can't do the detailed announcements because we're just going through the contractuals. But the simple answer is yes. We will be putting AI bots into what we do. So I'm trying to move our organisation into being more similar that you would do in your everyday life from a private sector experience. Now it's never going to be as good because we're a council, and that we everyone thinks you should be Amazon, right? We're not going to be Amazon because we don't even want to aspire to be like that because we won't have the resources. But what we should be expected is to have a conversation with an AI bot at midnight if you want to, or at 4 o'clock in the morning, rather than doing it at 9 o'clock when the customer contact centre opens and everyone starts ringing in because they think they might get an answer, right? Because we know lives don't work like that anymore. So we'll be announcing the investment. We'll be announcing our programme hopefully this month in terms of our investment in that. But again, it was always part of the plan to do this. We've got the plaudits for being the first, but I want us to take that step forward and make the greater investment, because actually technology becomes dated more quickly. I think the AI that we've got now is depreciating too significantly, and I've put in the investment case around doing that. And it will also help us to do more of the complicated parts of not just the resident experience that you might be talking about, that you might hear in your surgeries, or when you're talking to our residents. It's more of the complicated thing from more of our vulnerable residents, so how we do assessments. So actually that's where the significant benefit of using those AI tools, as opposed to just the day-to-day things that you see on the website. So getting the balance between those right. So yeah, I'm really excited about what we're about to achieve as a council, and the differential resident experience we're going to get. But to do that, you're right, we need to test it with people, and it's not with the smart people that know how to do this already. It's about, and it's a great example around languages. Actually, the investment that we've taken actually translate. So I could be speaking in Polish, it will translate it back to my person in the contact centre, or translate it from an AI perspective back into English. They will speak, and it will go back into Polish again. So it will take the big large language models from the most, I was about to say most significant languages. That would sound derogatory about different languages, but Hillingdon, we obviously have lots of derivations of languages, so it won't necessarily do all the languages that are spoken about in Hillingdon, given our diverse borough, but it will do the vast majority of the more significant languages. So that's a really exciting place, because previously we were paying for interpreters. Now we can do that digitally. That's a significant benefit for what we're doing. And when you're talking about being as efficient as possible, so we've invested in Copilot, and we're about to roll out Copilot, so that's Microsoft AI tool, to all of our staff. So for example, I'm in lots of meetings, I put Copilot on, it does all the minutes, all the actions for all my meetings, and that enables me to manage my inbox, to do presentations. It didn't do this presentation for me, by the way. So, but it helps shape most of the work that you will do. But it allows me time to do the significant value-added things that I could do for the organisation, rather than the less value-add activities. It helps me to manage my life, my working life, a little bit better, but also helps me to be as efficient as possible. And we're seeing that across the council, about how we're using that to minute meetings. For example, social workers now can go into having conversations with our vulnerable residents, transcribe those, upload those into our line of business systems, whereas previously they would have had the conversation, they would have written it down, they would have driven back to the office, they would have typed it up onto the line of business system, and the inefficiency that we want social workers to do. It's a really bad term, social working. You want your SMEs and your professionals to do professional work. You don't want them to be spending a lot of their time doing administration. You don't want them to spend a lot of their time doing data inputs. You want to get them to support our vulnerable residents in the best possible way, and that's how we're using technology at the moment. Again, you're trying to get the balance of funding right and looking at all the different technologies that are out there at the moment. So part of what Darren and I do is we're looking at the marketplace, we're talking to suppliers. There's a plethora of products out there at the moment in the market. A lot of our job is to understand, we work with colleagues across London, across the country, to understand who's adopting which are the best sort of products. We try and work in collaboration with things like the West London Alliance to drive changes that are more across multiple boroughs. So we're looking at some of the quick fixes. So sometimes you can do the testing via other people, which is a nice way of rolling out things more quickly. So we're operating in a very complicated ecosystem at the moment, and I probably get about 20 emails a day for the newest AI digital product that go and buy it, please, because it's the best thing. It's going to save you the most money. I'm the biggest believer in building things yourself, because then you're in control of them. We only buy products where we wouldn't have the skills to do it ourselves. That's why we might go more slowly than some of the other local authorities, but we will do things in the right way, because we've got to build up our competency capability, but also be in control of the changes we need to make. And part of that is the redesign of our processes end to end. But your point, much like Councillor Mader's point, is you've got to do that with feedback. You've got to do that with user testing. I would love to have a massive team to do that. I don't have a massive team to do that. I have people to do that, but I could do it all day, every day. But fundamentally, I wouldn't drive changes in the organisation to hit the savings we need to make. So again, I have to do the careful balance. You can supplement that by, as Councillor Mather said, by doing the feedback piece. If you're not going to do the testing, you can at least make sure you're doing the feedback and the altering the product. If you're in control of the product, you can change it as you go along. If you buy the product, you can't change it. So actually a lot of the feedback we get at the moment are via line of business systems or products that we've bought that you cannot actually change. And you would spend a massive amount of money trying to work with those companies to change the product, which is the mistake that most people make. So you've got to get the balance right. But, point taken across those, I agree, and we're doing what we can in that space. Hopefully that answered all your questions.
Just to follow up very slightly, if that's okay. How do we monitor the robots? And I'm going to use, I think, language as a really good one. I was having a conversation with Councillor Core, actually, after we did the Members Development Day on homelessness, and she was talking about, I was saying how I'd use ChatGPT to help me translate something into another language. It was a really basic thing, and I just shown somebody when I was out and about to translate what they wanted to know. And I think she'd been dealing with a homelessness case that had been quite complicated, and actually it hadn't translated from Gujarati into English very well. I'm guessing something like, when does your bin going to get picked up, will be quite easy to find in most languages, Romanian, Polish, etc., etc. But actually some of these things where they are quite personal, quite complicated, how do we ensure that we monitor the information that the robots potentially are going to give us? And I'm really pro using the robots. How do we ensure that that is actually the proper information, and people aren't inadvertently, by a misunderstanding of something in AI, filling out a form incorrectly, saying something incorrect, which doesn't actually give the full story? Because I think that would be something that we'd want to try and avoid, and possibly something we wouldn't be able to avoid if we didn't speak the language or didn't understand it completely.
That's a good question and an interesting one. So it's a beautiful segue back to a previous question. Number one, you do that by feedback mechanisms. So actually, through the language models that we're using, the AI that we will be introducing will learn constantly. So the more that you're being asked around those more standardised queries, the more it's going to learn in the different languages, the better it gets. So you would expect some teething problems at the start, but we're also picking technology that we're not the first people to use it. So it's got I would start being technical. I'm not technical, so I try not to be technical. It has a learning mesh that sits around it. So it basically sucks in all the data from everywhere it uses it. So whether it's I want to make a homelessness application, I want to collect a bin, I want my street cleaned, there's glass in my kids' playground. The more that happens, but not just on our site, across multiple sites, the more it will learn, the more it will be able to translate. So you've got that, and that's the beauty of AI. because it learns as it goes rather than it being a static being. But you would expect it not to be able to answer everything, and that's why you have the check and the balance around the feedback mechanisms where something doesn't work, and if something really doesn't work, you do the handoff. So if the query isn't answered by the robot or whatever you want to call it, then you've got the option of going back to a telephony platform. So it's almost, the first form of defence is that, but if that doesn't work, then you can move on to a telephony. Then if that doesn't work, then you can speak to a real person. So you've got the checks and balances around that, and it goes back to the making sure that we're protecting our use of data. Back to one of the previous questions, is by doing that you're using our residents' data to drive better decisions and to use it, but you need to use it in a safe and secure way. So we've got to make sure that we understand our data, we protect our data, but also to make sure that decisions aren't made by just that data source. There's a validation by a human being there, so you can get to 60 to 80 to 90% of the answer as you're moving through time, but most of the things you're never going to get up to 100% answer apart from some very simple assessments or some validation checks. You've always got to have the check and the balance in there, or the stopgap where things don't work. So that's how we build things into our ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions. I think that was a really interesting agenda item. Matthew, thank you for that detailed report. As we discussed, it'll be quite useful to get that afterwards, and people can digest it in their own time. Unless there's any other questions, I'll close off this topic and state that the committee notes the digital transformation update, and you're always welcome back in the future, Matthew, for future updates. So thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, the draft scoping report for review of maximising council spaces, a review of business and private hire opportunities.
Thank you, Chair. So members would have had sight of the draft scoping report into committee's review into maximising council spaces. Committee is now asked to consider the report and make any comments, and agree that the review can be initiated, and we can then explore witnesses. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll start the ball rolling on this agenda item. So, for those of you who remember from the previous committee meeting, this was a great point of debate, and we considered that this would be a good way to sort of move forward to create an asset register that would be used not just for cabinet but for members and the sort of wider community, so we could have an understanding of what rooms could be available for letting, also halls and offices, and we would also try and maybe differentiate between what could be available for like commercial users, domestic users, individual users. My personal views are, yes, we should move forward with the review, but I will open up to the committee for feedback and thoughts. Councillor Smallwood, let's start with you.
Thank you, Chair. Myself and Councillor Gohill may not get an opportunity, but I just thought 2 observations, and in fear of upsetting my ward colleague when he listens back to this meeting, I think £40,000 as the target. I think we could potentially aim a little bit higher. I think there's some, if we get this right, I potentially think there's some real scope. And I also think the committee should look at third-party opportunities, and I saw Brunel University was there, and I don't know what they think about this, but if we were to hire out or find a space at Brunel, because I'm sure they would love the opportunity to advertise further, maybe there can be a cost split. I don't know what that would look like, but could we, as well as advertising our own spaces with those people that we have strong partnerships with, whether it be people like Uxbridge College, Brunel University, or others that have a large amount of potential space for private hire or for business opportunities across the borough, we could go in and potentially explore collaboration with where we would maybe get a cut if we help them fill their space. I think this is an encouraging review that potentially could maximise the council's use of spaces, support potentially third sector and charities, as well as bringing in a good revenue stream for the council across our many fantastic assets. That would just be my thoughts for the review that could fit in various points, and I wish the committee luck with it.
Thank you, Councillor Smallwood. I'm in completely agreement with you. I think that's a very sort of salient points, and we'll make a note of that and revisit those thoughts when we actually get the review. Councillor Gohar.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just reading through the work plan for this, and the review planner. My apologies. Where you have witness sessions, etc. And I think it's great that you're looking to see how you can get witnesses from different, from not just universities, etc., but also from what seems like local businesses. So like I think wedding planners or event organisers was mentioned. I just wondered if the committee would like to expand its scope and expand to other businesses who might want to use our space, and also in addition to that, perhaps explore how we can, once we have a register of council assets or whatever the scope is going to produce, whether within that we can look to sorry, I don't know where my words are going this evening, whether we can look to integrate this using current council not processes, but current things the council has. So I'm thinking the Hillingdon First card. Once we have these assets available to us, a list of these assets available to us, are we able to then identify, perhaps yourselves as a committee, like Councillor Smallwood said, we're just visitors for this evening, but perhaps identifying where we can use the Hillingdon First card, so local businesses or even residents who want to use these spaces can get married. And just off the top of my head, I've got an example. Get married at the Hillingdon Civic Centre, and you get, with your Hillingdon First card, you'll get 10% off a local reception hall or something of that sort. It doesn't have to be that, but is that something the committee can perhaps take into account? So sorry for wording that in a really weird way.
No, thank you, Councillor Go. I think we got the gist of that, and the sort of intention that you were trying to sort of, convey. I think, again, previously we discussed that using your example of like a wedding, they did book maybe, a room in the Civic, maybe we have like a list of vendors that we could share with them, and vendors could pay to use that service, almost like preferred supplier list, saying that if you're going to have a wedding, if you want a cake, you can contact X, Y, and Z. If you want to, get dressed or whatever, ABC, so that is something that we will definitely consider. Okay, Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. I feel it's important that we don't just look at the value in terms of monetary sense for the council, but also how we can add value to the communities as well. And I know that's part of what's there, and it will be within the scope in intention, even if not explicitly listed. So I think it's really important that we build a base of witnesses that are from across the community and voluntary sector, from our local community centres, and really try and get an external view on what they have to offer, but also what they may need from us. And that may not always be at the highest commercial rate, but actually we can add a real value to services that are provided either on behalf of the council or just in complementing the council, by doing some more, I won't use the word peppercorn, but by having a bit more of a partnership with different providers. And we do know there may be examples in the past where it's not worked so well between the private or the voluntary sector or in other community spaces and places, and it would be useful to find out what those lessons were so that we can not repeat the same mistakes. The other one that I think may be missing is, unless I've missed it, is Uxbridge College Group, whatever they're called now, Richmond, Harrow, and everywhere group. I know they've recently taken on Borough Hall, for example, and they did talk about community use within their new partnership with the community and the council. So it would be useful to try and to add other educational, without taking every single school and every single educational space, but just thinking more around what value can the council add to communities, and also what community partnerships can be formed to add value to residents.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. I think, we're fully aligned on that, and I agree with all of those comments. And we'll, again, make a note of that and make sure we do address it in the review. Okay, Councillor Gale.
Sorry, I've just the ideas are flowing now. Hopefully my words flow a bit better as well. Sorry, I do genuinely have some serious points. When we get this asset register or whatever comes out of this committee scope, are we also going to look into what the occupancy rates are of those particular assets where it's relevant? So if it's a building or if it's a hall, how often are those getting booked? Are they old? Are they up to date with even things like are they up to date with health and safety or things like that? And secondly is just the idea of best practice, and again looking at the review planner. Have we considered, and this might be one for officers more than the committee, but have we considered looking at best practice across other boroughs, maybe some of our neighbouring boroughs? And I know in my resident service committee we've brought in people from Ealing before and Hounslow as well to see how they do things, and it might be an idea to do this if we can spot any good examples of what they've done. Thanks.
No, thank you, Councillor Gohill. That's a good point, and actually I mentioned this to Councillor Riley in the previous meeting. For those of you who use our tennis courts, we do actually have like a sort of system that you can book tennis courts. I think residents of their own sort of free will. I think there's data that does show occupancy, and we've already got this stuff in house, so maybe it is a case of leveraging it. I'm not sure, but something we can have a look at. Matthew.
Really good point around looking what other people do. So that's, again, modus operandi number one is go and cheat if you can and look at what other boroughs do. We have really good close working relationships across local authorities, particularly our neighbours, and if someone does it better than us, that's the first thing we always do is we go and talk to our peers to find out if there's a better way of doing things. Chair, you picked up a really important point. We do a lot of this already. It's just we don't do it in the best way as an organisation. So we have multiple different booking systems and approaches across the council. So we have one for tennis courts, we have one in libraries at the moment. So the danger is we've bought lots of different systems to do this in the past. Why I'm supportive of this review and my encouragement is, so I think it's great to map it out in the first place, and I use the analogy of it's like dropping a stone into a lake. Is we want to do the first bit around doing the discovery, so actually you want to find out from a user perspective what they want. So you've all been talking about user and feedback, so we've got to embody some of that into what we do, but also let's start off with doing the first bit of mapping to understand what we've got already. And actually you talk about an asset register. I agree. So we're developing a new asset register, and actually putting around that is we've got a lot of buildings, we've got a lot of rooms. Actually having that in one place and all the different things you have got as a council that you might want to book, whether that be rooms or tennis courts or pitches or that kind of stuff, is start off with what you've got first, and then expand it out a little bit more into doing the if you try and do too much too quickly, you will probably fail. But this is my experience of doing this kind of work, and I've done this one in the past, in fact, is start off with do council assets first, map that out, let's make the best use of the council assets and the plethora of the buildings we've got at the moment, and the importance might be to think about our assets in a different way. They're just buildings and they have stuff in them. If they've got rooms, it doesn't matter whether it's a library or children. So it's sometimes thinking about the infrastructure and the ability for different types of resident groups to use those different types of buildings, depending on security, depending on hours, all that kind of stuff. So I think plotting that out first would be incredibly useful, and then open it up to things like the voluntary sector groups, understanding what different there's when you talk to a lot, and you'll know this more than I do from a member's point of view, there are so many smaller community groups that sitting in different areas that actually just want space to be able to do things, and actually from a digital point of view it's quite hard to understand unless you're in that area and you know that building of what's available to you. We want to kind of democratise that a little bit more and make that more open for different people, different groups to use. So I think actually starting off fairly simple at the start, but doing that understanding piece first would be really critical in understanding the need and understanding what's out there at the moment. So I'm supportive rather than jumping into the solution, because we've got some of the solutions there already, they're just not optimised. So it will be me that delivers some of this. So I kind of require the good bit of the understanding, doing the user testing, doing the understanding what data we've got at the moment, as in what buildings, what rooms we've got. If that's really successful, it will be a great review.
Thank you, Matthew. I think there are a lot of salient points in what you just said, and as I said, yeah, we will sort of note these. Councillor Mathers.
Just a very quick question then. Do we have a process or a form that organisations can submit their information? I know these things, directories and things, are a nightmare to maintain, but I think there may have used to been one where on the old website there was, you could find a building and it would show you when it was founded, and it wouldn't tell you necessarily where it was and what was going on, but it would tell you some little bits. But is it easy for organisations to feed in and go, we have this space, or is there the system already there? I guess, because what I wouldn't want us to do is replicate too much, and actually a call for information from the public, voluntary sector, is probably more useful to give a start than spending a lot of officer time, member time, trying to find every single corridor across the city. So I guess my sense is what already exists, that may come in usefully. Maybe it's a question more for the review as to what things already exist in terms of mapping, scoping, what tools have we turned off that we used to have that we don't want to turn on again, or those sort of things.
Yeah, so we have. You're right. We have quite a lot of. We've got directories of services. We've got directory of events, but we don't have a single platform or a single mechanism for doing this for spaces at the moment. So again, we have the different booking systems that don't necessarily have the feedback loop to some of those things. So you're right. Is start off with. As part of the government digital service approach, you would do a discovery and look at what you've got already as in the as-is before you move in the to-be. So you're right, is looking at what we've got already before we think about before you solutionise what the answer might be. So I think that's right, is adopting that approach is the most sensible thing. And sometimes you can do some simple shortcuts actually by sometimes just creating a form and opening it up as part of the feedback or the intelligence gathering is sometimes a good way to start. So yeah, I think starting off with what you've got is important, but also looking at what other people do that's better, because you can always start off what you've got, but it's always worth looking at what does really, really good look like elsewhere.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to move to ask the committee to approve the initiation of the review. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7, Cabinet Forward Plan. Agreed. Okay, item number 8, the Works Programme.
Just 2 quick updates, if I may. Councillor Riley has asked for an information item to be added onto the work programme about the right to buybacks, if the committee is happy with that. And also, just by way of an update, there is a plan to bring a performance update to all select committees later this year, as part of improving our governance cycle of reporting of service performance. But that's just an update. So if the committee is happy with that, happy to note that update, Chair, with you, that can be approved.
Yeah.
Chair, just on a quick point of order, I just wondered if I could just commend you on behalf of the committee. I think standing in last minute and doing this kind of thing is always difficult, especially when the chairman and the vice chairman are missing and having 2 substitutes. And I think you've chaired this meeting very capably. So thank you very much, and congratulations on your first chairing of a meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Smallwood. Okay, so this ends part 1 of today's steering committee. Thank you to those who attended in person and those who've been following us on YouTube. We now bring to an end this meeting. Okay.